So, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Good. Doing pretty good. Doing, we got our second COVID shot next Monday.
Oh, good. Yeah, I
So,
got mine last Saturday, my second
yeah.
one.
How'd you feel afterwards?
A little tired, a little achy, but that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty much how we felt our first shot.
Just took a couple Tylenol and I was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Okay. Well, this is Simon Gilmore with Twin Flicks. And today we have a special guest, the man who puts the horror in horror, Mr. Dave Parker.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime. Yeah.
I don't know if did I put the horror in horror. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I guess it depends who you are. Well, first off, did you get to see the trailer to Venom 2 that premiered this morning?
I did catch it. It looks fun. I like the first movie quite a bit,
Yeah.
so I had a really good time. I was really surprised with the first Venom. I don't know why, because I like that director. I like it was Ruben Fleischer, and I'm a Tom Hardy fan. So, but it took me by surprise of how fun it was. So, this one teased just enough without really telling you anything about it. So I think that's a good thing, because I like to go in as blind as I can. So it looks cool. I love Carnage. So there we go.
Yeah. Now, I'm not that familiar with the Venom comic books. I don't know how familiar you are, but is it right to say they're trying to make him into a hero rather than a bad guy? Or
he started out sort of as he started out as SpiderMan's black suit. And then became sort of a villain. And then he's progressed to be sort of this anti-hero kind of thing. So I think that's kind of cool. And if they're able to start blending, the Spider-Man universe stuff, within, even better.
I love the scene where it shows him on the table when they're about to do the lethal injections.
Yeah,
and you see the red fluid coming in and stops it and stuff. That gave me the chills.
That was really cool. And then Woody Harrelson's I think gonna be a blast.
Oh, dude, I love him. He's one of the finest actors, I think. I mean, going from Cheers, his dim-witted character on Cheers, to Natural Born Killers. I mean, my God,
and then War of the Planet of the Apes, even. Never mind all the amazing stuff that he's done in dramas and Academy Award level, material as well. But no, he, looking from where he came from with Cheers, you would have never expected him to go quite as high as he has. But hey, just proves,
when you're an actor,
what a great actor he is.
Yeah, he truly is. Yeah. So let's begin and find out a little bit about you, about your background. If you want to tell us where you come from.
I grew up in Vermont, in a small town outside of like the main city, I guess, in Vermont, which is Burlington. My dad owned a contractor business for a lot of years. And my mother did various things from besides raise us, she was in real estate. She opened her own store. She was always doing something,
Sure.
She kept very busy as well. I have two brothers. One still lives in Vermont. The other one lives in Arizona. One's retired. He got to retire early. The other one is a project manager for a health company. Very diverse. I'm the only weird one who decided to be a permanent child and try to make movies and stuff like that, which just shows that they're a lot smarter than I was.
So you don't have any other family that's decided to go your route into the movies or TV?
No, nobody in my family or my extended family has anything to do with the entertainment business at
It's
all.
Interesting. Yeah, kind of you're the odd one out, like you said.
I am in a family of black sheeps. I guess I'm one of the blackest.
So how did you get into making movies? What was your was there a movie that you saw and you're like, this is what I want to do for a living? Or how did you?
Yeah, I was always fascinated with I mean, it started when I was a kid with dinosaurs, and then I found Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine as a kid, where I couldn't even read the magazine, but I liked the pictures.
Yeah.
And it was growing up in this sort of amazing time of fantasy movies and everything. And then when I was 11, I think 11, 12, maybe younger, I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, and that blew me away. And they had a TV special on about the stunts in the making of the movie, which really showed me for the first time, at least from what I can remember seeing, what it was like to make a movie. And then I saw George Romero and Stephen King's Creep Show in the theater. And then that just did it. And then I just had then I had the bug, and I got the horror bug. And then it was just but the thing is, living in Vermont, living in a small town, there really wasn't anyone to make movies with. So I really couldn't go make home movies with people or anything like that. My brothers were too old and they weren't interested in helping me out in that way. And my friends were off a distance because we lived outside of town. So I just sort of had to bide my time and try to learn through reading books and magazines and everything about filmmaking as much as I could at the at the time. And then then eventually just made the move out here, when I was 18, 19.
Okay. Yeah, that's similar to us. Where we grew up, a little bigger city, Vancouver, Washington. We have a younger brother who we forced him into doing some of our home movies that we made. And we learned, we're pretty much self-taught. Listening to film commentaries, the behind the scenes, like you said, with Raiders, and of course that incredible behind the scenes of the Star Wars Empire of Dreams, I believe it was called. And
but that, if I had that a long time ago, that would have been great. But that only came out, less than 10 years ago. I think.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Maybe just a little over 10 years ago. But yeah, if I had the wealth of behind the scenes documentaries and commentaries and Criterion editions and everything else that, people do now, that's available to us now. Yeah, it would have been a whole nother thing. It would have been it would have been amazing.
Yeah, we're 80s kids. And so we would, before, I guess that would be pre-commentary and more in depth, but we would try to assimilate and just grab on anything that we could on filmmaking, whether it be little snippets here on TV or the behind the scenes stuff. And we just gravitate toward that. And we learn how to do, make our own stop motion movies and
right.
Progress from there. And so it's. Did you go to film school or?
I did go to USC. I only went for a year, so it wasn't really getting into the production side of film school, especially like the first couple of years. You don't really get to do that. But I did take film classes, and I actually had professors that, that had advised me that it's like that I probably should save my money, because the production side of getting into like USC or one of these film schools is so competitive and costly and everything, that I probably, given my situation, would learn more if I just started working. So instead of spending the money, I just moved out here and then I took their advice and I did start working on stuff. And they were right. I learned more working on the first film I ever worked on than I did an entire year of film school. And that's, not to take away from, proper, film schools and stuff like that. They all have their place and their value, of course. I have friends who teach at film schools, but I just, at the time, at least, I just wasn't interested in knowing, someone's interpretation of what a shadow on the wall meant and what that stood for and represented, as opposed to here's the nuts and bolts and here's the practical, how you do this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
The theory at the time hadn't interested me as much as, maybe it does now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, that's very similar to us. We were very interested in going to film school, but we were told, don't waste your money. We had to put together a reel. We were maybe 15, 16, which kind of young to go to film school anyways, but
sure.
We had put together a reel of some of our stuff and showed it to a couple people. And they said, dude, there's no reason for you to go to film school. You pretty much know what you're doing anyways. It's just the technical side that
right.
we needed to really learn, and which we did on sets. We went to as many sets as we could, and you learned so much just by being on those sets and watching. And just as you said, it's so. What was the first film that you worked on, or that you went on a set for?
The first film that I worked on was a film. It was an independent sort of art film called Eddie Presley, and it was directed by Jeff Burr. And Jeff Burr had been one of these journeyman type of directors in a way. He started out with this movie, an anthology film called From a Whisper to a Scream with Vincent Price. It's also known as The Offspring. That's what it came out on home video. And then he directed Stepfather 2, and then he did Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which Rob Burnett worked on. Mm-hmm. And this was the movie he did a couple years after that. And he wanted to get back to its roots and tell sort of a Hollywood story and stuff. So when I moved here, a friend of mine connected me with Jeff, and I met him, and then they, usually you start as like a production assistant or something, but because it was such a small movie, they said, do you want to be props assistant? So I never actually just PA'd on a movie. Mm-hmm. So that was the first movie I worked on. And it was fascinating. And there was a lot of like, cult and sort of fringe level Hollywood actors in it. And, I mean, some great actors, but, people like Clu Gulager and John Lazar, who was in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and Roscoe Lee Brown, who was in The Cowboys with John Wayne, mm-hmm. and Daniel Roebuck, and Tom Everett, and just, a whole bunch of people. And then because Jeff knew, all these people in town, there were a lot of people who would come and visit. So through him, I met like producer, writer, director Darren Scott, who, did Menace to Society and Tales from the Hood and, mm-hmm. Things like that. And so within meeting Jeff and working on that film, I got to meet a lot of people who were about 10 years or so older than me that had been here doing it for a while and stuff. So they were nice enough to take me under their wing and sort of help me out. And that just kept, building with more experiences on other shoots.
Yeah. See, I've always loved that. I always loved having these older ones, more experienced individuals grabbing hold of the quote unquote newbie and show them the ropes, show them what to do. I've always appreciated it. Helps so much.
It's really, it's almost like mentoring. Is what I feel like they did. And I certainly let, someone like Jeff, who, I was lucky that the production was very small. So you had easy access to the director where you wouldn't always. And sometimes if it was like a studio film, I wouldn't even be allowed to talk to the director. So, mm-hmm. So in that sense, I was fortunate to be able to learn, from him and, a lot of that stuff was, invaluable because, if he hadn't seen the enthusiasm that I put in and the hard work that I was putting in and the determination, then, there were plenty of people on that film who didn't get that treatment from him, who just sort of just treated it like a day job and went about their day and then went home. So, So I was fortunate. Those guys really early on helped quite a bit.
Yeah, that's great. So what was your first real gig as either writer, director when you?
Well, the the first real writing assignment that I ever got was a couple years after working on Jeff's movie. I ended up getting hired at Full Moon Entertainment, which is Charlie Band's company after Empire Pictures. And this was around the time that they were making like the third Puppet Master movie and the third Trancers movie and stuff like that. And I started working in the promotions department under this guy, Daniel Schweiger, who was the editor of all the trailers. So again, being very enthusiastic, knowing who Charlie was and knowing Empire Pictures and stuff, very early on, I wrote a note saying that, you know, how happy I was to be there and that I really wanted to do whatever it took to be able to eventually make a movie there. So he had me dialed in already. He knew what carrots to dangle for me and stuff like that. So a couple of years go by and stuff, and, you know, pitching ideas again, because Charlie was incredibly accessible at the time. And again, talk about like something that doesn't exist anymore. A real family company in a lot of ways. His wife was head of development. Everyone was accessible. You know, you talk to everyone, you go through different departments, and it was really, really great. And it's something that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. There's not really that kind of thing where, it was a factory, but for me anyway, it was the ideal kind of factory because of the types of movies he was making. He was making, you know, pretty cool science fiction, fantasy, and horror, you know, material that had a good level of production at the time.
Yeah. And you could feel that translated into his movies. At least for me, I always felt like, you know, there's something about these movies that you can tell is a family business. You could always tell. And like today, where it's just run by a studio and all they care about is the numbers. Whereas someone like Charles Band and Lloyd Kaufman and all those great producers,
Roger Corman,
of course, can't forget about him. You just feel it. You just feel enveloped in these movies, and that they're on a more personal level. So ask you.
Sorry to quickly finish the story. So worked a couple of years and everything, and their biggest titles were Puppet Master, and then there was a point where Paramount wanted a new trilogy of Puppet Master movies, away from the sort of almost like a side series in a way. And when they did Puppet Master 3, it was set in World War II, and it was very popular for Paramount and for Full Moon. So they decided they wanted to do 3 more like offshoots of that with the World War II timeline. So me and another friend, Jay Wolfel, were hired to write 3 Puppet Master movies called Puppet Wars. And they were blending of the Puppet Master idea set in World War II, but also mixing in sort of the classic monsters with each one. So the first one had, a mummy type theme to it. The second one was Dracula and vampires. And then the third one had sort of a Frankenstein aspect to it. Unfortunately, the deal with Paramount ended before those movies were made. We were in pre-production on the first one when the Charlie's Paramount deal ended, and these were going to be funded by them, and they own the script, so they never got made. So, but that was like the first real professional thing that I got hired to write.
Okay.
At the time.
Yeah, that would have been really awesome to see.
Well, I've gone back and read the scripts, and it was just sort of like, I don't know what we were thinking, because, you know, with the amount of effects and puppet stuff that we wrote into these things, it would have been like, you know, I mean, each one would have been $5 to $10 million, I think, at the time. They were just way too expensive. It's kind of incredible that we were so naive. I mean, we just wanted to write the coolest thing possible, but I can only imagine what the end result would have ended up being, much smaller. So
kind of might have been a little disappointed to see.
Maybe just a little bit.
Who knows? But so what was your actually, let's go with directing. What was your first directing
Well, I started directing some second unit stuff for Full Moon for Charlie. The first thing that he had me do was Dave Dakota, who is a sort of an in-house director there, directed a lot of movies for Charlie. He had a movie called Shrieker, and they asked me to kind of come up with a title sequence. So we did this shoot with someone, and we created this title sequence. So that was like the first directed thing that I had done.
Okay.
And then I ended up doing some second unit stuff in 3D for Charlie's 3D movie called The Creeps. And it was, I mean, that was simple stuff. It was like establishing shots and a couple little inserts here and there. It was nothing big. Then he had me direct this thing. He was around the time that Roland Emmerich's Godzilla was coming out. There's an effects artist named Michael Deek, and he just for fun, he built this like miniature city and had this creature suit and shot some stuff of it stomping around stuff. And Charlie and destruction and everything else. And Charlie got a look at this and said, we should make, one of these giant monster movies. So Mike did one, and then they got someone to do, he directed all the effect sequences, and then someone directed the story proper. And that was called Zarkor. Okay. I don't know where Charlie gets these ideas from, but I think from old comic books. And then he came up with one called Kra the Sea Monster, and they shot it. He didn't really care for a lot of the movie outside of the effect sequences. And then he got this idea of making this sort of space police force that, helps fight the monster. So I ended up directing that stuff, which is not good at all. It's really terrible, and not due to anyone else except me not knowing what the hell I was doing.
Sure,
really.
Yeah.
But the only thing of note is it starred Alison Lohman in her first role. So I cast Alison Lohman in her first part. So I did that. There is a credit there is a credit on the IMDb that I wish wasn't there, at least especially under directing, because there was no directing, called Bimbo Movie Bash, which was all Charlie wanted. Was he used to do these things when he had Wizard Video, which were these compilation reels.
Yeah.
It was a cheap way to like do a title and get it out there. Well, he asked me and another friend of mine to put together this, to go coincide with Independence Day, but with all his, Bimbo movies and all these old movies of his. And what we proposed at the time was What's Up Tiger Lily, and we were going to revoice all the actors, but he said, no, you can't do that. So it became this real hodgepodge thing to get through. And then, when we did it, we did the best we could, because literally we had no money except what he was paying us to put this together. Then he put our names on as directors. And it was like, I mean, at the time, I didn't have a directing credit. So I was like, who cares? I didn't have a lot of foresight, I guess. The only funny thing was it did get featured in Entertainment Weekly at the time, which was kind of a big deal because none of the movies were. So I guess just because it was so ridiculous. But I don't really recommend. There might be a joke or two that actually land, and I think the rest is pretty. Our version that we were going to revoice was going to be much better, but yeah, I mean, and it's funny because last year Charlie does something called Corona Zombies.
Yeah.
And he shoots a day of new footage, and then what's he do? He What's Up Tiger Lilies, the old Italian movies that he's using. So in the end, he ended up doing the kind of thing that we wanted to do anyway. But
and don't nix those credits, man. The credits are what get you the the next job. A lot of the times they see that you have some experience.
I can say Bimbo Movie Bash did not lead to the next job.
Safely.
Safely. I can really safely say that.
Okay. So let's talk about House of the Dead for a little bit.
Okay.
How did you get involved with that, or how was that? Did that manifest?
Okay. So what happened was 1999, Charlie gave me my first full-length feature to direct, and it was a zombie movie. So it's called Dead Hate the Living. Again, it's not very good. Not that again, no money, 10-day shoot, pretty ambitious with the effects, too ambitious at times. And the main problem with it is that I cut it, and I was not a feature editor at the time. So it's slow. It's really slow. But anyway, so I directed this movie, and at the time I was hanging out with Rob Burnett a lot and a whole group of friends. And there were times that we would all get together and we would watch stuff or we would show stuff that we were working on. So there was one day where we all got together and we watched two movies. One was, I believe Michael Hurst or his brother's movie, who's another director. And then I showed everyone The Dead Hate the Living, and it was filled with a lot of silly film in jokes and everything else. And anyway, at the time, Mark Altman was at that screening, and I had met Mark at the same time Rob did in San Diego in 1994. So he watched it and got all excited because it was zombies and everything. And he goes, "Hey, would you be interested in House of the Dead?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, well, let's meet and everything." So I go meet and we talk, and he and his producing partner at the time, Dan Bates, proceed to tell me, and this would be around early 2000s or so. So he proceeds to tell me that they don't want to adapt the game at all. They want to do this sort of as a prequel to the game and sort of set things up. And I'm like, okay. And so red flag right there for me.
Yeah.
But they were worried because right at the same time, the first Resident Evil movie was in development. It hadn't been shot yet, or it was shooting, and they were afraid that they were going to be too similar. And then they were like, "Oh, we should set it on an island during a rave." And I started to get worried because but it wasn't exactly the type of thing that I like with my zombie movies. But I'm like, I would be an idiot to like go, well, no, it's got to be the way I want to do it. I mean, it's House of the Dead, it's a title, and it could lead to something. So I go about writing it. And then I turn in my first draft, which is admittedly, pretty rough, but it's got the spine, it's got the ideas in there. And then Mark Altman took a pass at the script, and that kind of confused me because it was the character names and the sort of story spine, but everything else was different. And there was a lot more humor, and there was a lot more like movie in jokes. And my thing was that The Dead Hate the Living had a lot of that stuff in it. And I didn't want that because I was like, well, that's all anyone is going to think that I can do. But anyway, but that was the Mark Altman draft is the one that they sent out. And that's the one that eventually got to Uwe Boll, who came in with the financing and made the movie. And then we got what we got.
Yeah.
I think I said it many times. For the record, neither Mark or I ever wrote in that video game footage was going to appear in the movie. I don't think we could have ever conceived of something so ill-advised. I guess because Uwe had the money, he was kind of in charge, and they were just sort of along for the ride too, I guess. But yeah, and then the movie came out in theaters, which was, that was exciting. I mean, it was a theatrical movie. It played a lot of theaters, and it was, selling out opening night. it's just one of those things where just, the end result just isn't very good, and more work should have been done on the script.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Was your version of the script more of a serious, darker tone than?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in spirit wise, at least I like to think that it was much more in tune with at least with the tone of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some creatures and definitely a different variety of zombies that I described in there. And it's been so long since I've read it, I don't even remember exactly what set pieces, if any of them, translated to what was made. I did the Rave was their suggestion. I did write it in, but I didn't write it as like this beach party.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't write it to take place during the day. It was really meant to be this sort of Wicker Man, Burning Man effigy kind of rave.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think any of those guys had ever been to one before, so they didn't really know or think that it mattered that it was during the day, or it was, I don't know if it was too expensive to light that area. They certainly seemed to have money, so I'm not exactly sure where things fell, because I was never, after I turned in my draft and then I read Mark's rewrite, I didn't hear anything for a couple of years, and then the movie was shooting. I was not invited to set, which was, I believe, up in Vancouver or Toronto, one of the two. It was up in Canada. They shot it. And then I didn't hear anything until it was finished. And then I saw it, and that was it. So I really had no participation after reading Mark's rewrite of what I did. So, but I'm sure Mark was thinking that he was doing me a favor by putting my name first. As writer credit, I would have rather just had story by have him take the full screenplay credit, because it really doesn't reflect what I did. But I know he gets upset too that I always say that, because he thinks that I'm throwing the blame on him. It's like, no, I really throw the blame on Uwe, but he's sort of proven himself in that sense. But yeah,
if anybody's ever seen any of Uwe's Bulls movies, they know what they're getting into, what we're talking about. And
there are worse movies. It just doesn't seem like it at the time. And the problem is, it does stink, because when you are connected with a movie that is so hated and so rated so low and everything, it does affect your prospects in your career. And not just on the outside level, but also when you're a part of a blunder like that, it at least for me, which just shows how sort of maybe my skin was not tough enough then, it really psychologically like knocked me out for a while. So I didn't have any desire to. So I did the wrong thing, where I went and focused on other things and didn't continue writing and continue trying to make movies for, I think, almost 6 years after that. I worked on editing stuff and that type of thing, but not actually trying to make anything.
Yeah. Well, as we were talking before this, Paul and I, if we've had some movies that were our babies taken away from us as well, and it's detrimental to you psychologically. We got into a depression, and you just didn't want to do anything for a while. You kind of just want to sit back and recuperate, figure out what did I do that was wrong, and not to make the same mistake next time.
Right. But you realize that a lot of it's out of your control, but it doesn't matter, because you look, but my name's on there. I mean, that's the thing that people don't talk about as much. I mean, is the, it's fighting, your thoughts and your feelings and your insights when you don't feel that great, and being able to, persevere and push on is I mean, that's the thing. It's like, and no school, no one prepares you or tells you the emotional and mental toll that trying to do this can have on you, because it's a passion driven thing. It's other artists are tortured, musicians and painters and sculptors and stuff. The only difference is, most of the time they can do their stuff by themselves. They don't need a crew full of people. If you want to make something, it's very difficult to, unless you're doing animation and you want to do it yourself, it's very difficult to like just go out and make something.
Exactly.
So yeah.
You're probably your biggest success, which is Hills Run Red. So how did you get involved with that? How did you get involved with Joe Silver hiring you? And
what happened was, and this is how long it took. In 2005, I was working with Rob Burnett. He had started to hire me to edit his the special features he was producing for things like The Usual Suspects, the X-Men films, Valley Girl, the Chronicles of Narnia. And at the time we were working on Superman Returns and doing this very expansive documentary. 3.5 hours are on the special edition or on the Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
So we were working on that. And then some friends of mine were getting calls from these guys out of New York called Media Blasters.
Okay,
and they had done a couple productions. They were releasing a lot of Italian movies and imports and stuff like that on DVD and nice editions. And they had made 2 like small genre flicks. One called Flesh of the Beast, and the other one was called Shadow Dead Riot. And they had done those on the East Coast, and the head of the company was interested in maybe looking at the West Coast to see if there were anybody interested in doing their projects. So a bunch of people they approached, director friends of mine, were like, yeah, I'm not interested, but you should reach out to Dave. He'd probably do it. So through that, and through Dan Schweiger, who was friends with one of the Media Blasters producers, we got sent 2 screenplays. One was The Hills Run Red, and one was called Wicked Lake, which they made a little later after ours. And then they were going to be coming out to Los Angeles to take meetings. So Rob took Wicked Lake, and then I took The Hills Run Red because we just picked the ones that we had a little more interested in than the other. So I went through the script, I wrote notes, I had artwork created, and I made this whole presentation for when they came in and met with us, saying this is what I would do. Mm-hmm. And they eventually agreed. They liked the ideas behind it, and they really liked the idea and were willing to spend a little money to get our friend David Scow, who had written The Crow, to rewrite the script basically from page 1.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of say in the story. And then, so we got Dave together with them, and we talked about what we wanted to do. Luckily, they were in line and agreeing to what we want to do, because we weren't going to lose any of the horror aspect or intensity of it. We were just going to sort of refine the idea so it made sense and it wasn't totally derivative of a bunch of other things that you'd seen before. Yeah. And also that it was realistically not so nasty that it was just going to turn people off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the first one was trying to be a little more extreme. And again, at the time, it was only going to be made for like $250,000. It was still going to be a very low budget film, but Rob was really interested in having his company, Ludovico Technique, start slowly branching off into the production side of things as well. So David Scow went off and rewrote it. We went back and forth with the producers for a while. And as we were working on Superman Returns, they also decided that they wanted us to shoot a teaser trailer so that they could take it to sales markets and see what they could drum up interest and possibly some financing. It was also a unspoken director's test, because for some reason they started to become very wary and not trust that we were going to be able to pull off all the things that we said, even though everything that we said we were going to do had happened and was happening. So we went and directed this teaser, and at the time, because we were working on Superman Returns, Bryan Singer was very aware of this project and everything, and he would ask Rob what's going on, and these guys were really taking their time about things, and some of it was getting a little unpleasant on the producer side of it. I didn't have to, I had to hear about it, but I wasn't involved in that as much. But to his credit, Bryan Singer was the one who was like, well, this is ridiculous. You have the Rider of the Crow, you have this title, they should be a Warner Brothers movie. And he was the one who made the call to Diane Nelson, who was the head of Warner Premiere at the time, and set up a meeting. Now it was up to us to show the teaser and give them the script and everything. And it was us to sell them on it. But if he hadn't opened the door, we would have never gotten that opportunity. So
I'm sorry, is that the teaser? Was that's shown in the movie? Or
no. The teaser that we did is on the Blu-ray edition of it. But no, that the thing in the movie itself, we shot when we shot the movie.
Okay.
So we met with Diane Nelson and Matt Bierman, who was also at Warner Premiere. And I left that meeting going, there is no way in hell that Warner Brothers is ever going to make this movie. This is a waste of time. It's way too nasty. I was like, this is, ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, we get a call and said, well, we have this deal with Dark Castle and Joel Silver, and we think this would be great for them. And my jaw just dropped on the floor. I'm like, well, I've never been glad to be so wrong in my life. And then what happened became a year of waiting for the movie to be greenlit, and then for us to prep, and then quickly all that stuff happened. We did another pass on the script, and then I was off to Bulgaria to prep before we started shooting. So yeah, there was a long waiting period, but then once it was go time, it went very quickly.
Yeah, that's typically what happens. A lot of waiting, and then when it happens, boom, it happens fast, and you're like, whoa, wait a second, what's going on here?
But it was exciting.
So with filming in Bulgaria, what was that like? Did they have an English speaking crew, or was it?
All the department heads were English speaking. And I had an Italian production designer, but most of the, and we had the effects people were brought over from the States. But all the department heads all spoke English, and they were great. I mean, I can't say enough good things about filming in Bulgaria and the Bulgarians, and how professional, and how, even if they don't speak the language, they can tell when you're enthusiastic, and they I think they appreciated that they were working on a bunch of smaller budgeted pictures for them and everything, and some bigger ones, but most of the time it was like, oh, we're in Bulgaria, and it's just sort of workman-like work and everything. And rarely were the directors like doing these crazy kind of movies with lots of blood and fair amount of nudity, and seeing a director who was so enthusiastic and excited about what they were doing and appreciative of them, because it's rare. I guess, at least at the time, it was not totally uncommon, but I guess it was rare for the director to say good morning and good night and thank you to everyone before you started your day or ended your day. So that part was really, really fantastic.
Yeah. So you're working with Joel Silver. You're working with some of these great names. You got Bill Sadler in the movie.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself more challenged or intimidated by working with all these big names?
Well, Joel Silver, I never met until after.
Okay.
Which is funny. He had a great producer that at Dark Castle that was assigned to this project. His name is Eric Olson. And then we had Ethan Irwin and Sean Finnegan. And those guys were sort of my point guy producers on it, along with the line producers. But Eric was there in Bulgaria with me for most of the shoot, almost at least 85% of the shoot. And so he was great. Yes, it was intimidating, and it was challenging because I had never been challenged or vetoed as much. But and while sometimes it was frustrating, ultimately it was a really good lesson to learn in politics and on set politics. And sometimes I fucked up and said the wrong thing or made mistakes, and other times I took it for what it was. And it was definitely a big learning experience, having that many people who you at least had to listen to. You didn't always have to do what they said, but you always had to take into consideration their suggestions. And that went from production through post, and do it in a tactful, respectful way. So you weren't needlessly, picking,
Sure.
fights, and knowing what battles to pick. So yeah, but it was great. And Sadler, while intimidating, couldn't have made me feel more comfortable. He was really easygoing. I didn't have to really tell, I had to explain to him how I saw the character. After that, I really didn't have to tell Bill much. I mean, whatever he needed to keep in check. It's oh, so bro, remember that before this there was this, and then or after this is this. So just to help him remember. But when you have someone like that, the guy is
pretty much does it.
He's way more professional than I'll ever be, and way more experienced. And you just sort of let him go. And I think at the end, he was surprised how much fun he had in it, and that it wasn't going to be a total slum fest for him.
Yeah.
So he's hopefully he's not going, oh God, that movie. Why did I do that movie? Because he got to do some pretty, I think he got to do some pretty fun stuff in that. And he was really, but all the actors were really great to work with. I enjoyed working with all of them.
And you get the sense of that when watching the movie. You could tell you guys had a lot of fun making that movie. Given the past experience that you've had on different movies and writing and so forth, and this experience that you were having during making that movie, what was the most challenging thing in making that movie?
The most challenging thing was working with the line producers who were inserting themselves creatively, and they shouldn't have been. But the thing is, anytime you tried to shut them down on that, they became very aggressive. And especially when it was just when the silver people were not there, they thought, the thing is, they thought that they could override me more than they actually could, because what they sort of didn't realize. But again, at the end of the day, they were holding the purse strings for the crew, but the crew was way more on my side than they were on their side. So they were willing to give me things that they just said I wouldn't ever get. And then the crew agreed. So, in certain shots and types of setups and stuff, but it was, they made things unnecessarily difficult. But that's just sort of I think that's just sort of their MO. I mean, they helped in a lot of ways, but they had their own agenda, and their biggest thing was they knew I was green in their eyes, and they were not going to allow me to embarrass them at all. There was no way that they were not going to deliver to Joe Silver a professional movie, and their whole thing was they were going to do it their way, whether I liked it or not. So that's where it became difficult. The editing aspect of it became frustrating, because when we shot the movie, they said they wanted it to be unrated, and then when they saw the unrated version, which was there's some unpleasant stuff in it, but it's not it's not something like a Serbian film or anything like that. We didn't make the most offensive movie of all time, but we definitely pushed some buttons. So, but when they they reneged and said, we're not releasing this unrated, then it was a scramble of cutting a lot of things out. And the thing is, what we had done, where those problems came with that idea of we're cutting it to an R rating, is the fact that some of the scenes that had to be cut because of the violence or the nature of them also contained plot and story points that you couldn't recover and put into something else. And there was no option of reshoots. None of that was going to happen because they were not sending us back to Bulgaria and the cast and everything to reshoot. So we just had, luckily I had some, incredibly creative editors who helped immensely and did the best they could, but there's still some things that are just sort of like head scratchers that if some of that excise material had remained, would have at least story sense, I think, make more sense.
There's a couple things I wanted to ask you that Paul and I, we've always wanted to know about making of Hills Run Red. Is in the we talked about the trailer. It was in the movie, the fake trailer that you guys made, and then later on at the end, it shows it again, where you have the hand raising up in the middle of the bloody water. How was that done?
So we found this kind of ravine, we found a hillside, and then we went to the bottom, and our production designer built this long table with, and then they put dirt and stuff to match the hill and backed it up against the hill before it got to the floor, and then cut a hole. We had someone underneath with their hand ready, covered in trash bags and plastic so they wouldn't get drenched. And then at the top of the hill, we had 5 55-gallon drums that the effects people filled with fake blood. And then I think 3 or 4 cameras shot a plate, and then shot a clean plate for the top, because obviously there were guys at the top of the hill pouring the blood. And then we just, keyed in the clean plate. So, when you get the wide, you don't see them. And it just, it was really kind of that easy. Just old school.
It's one of our, from the very first time we saw it, it's one of our favorite shots in the entire movie. Just always loved that.
It was very cool to see. That was towards the end of the shoot too. So that was really neat.
Just one of the most,
and it reminds David Scow goes, it reminds him of the old Chiller Theater logo.
Yeah.
Which is a bloody hand coming out of the ground. So
yeah,
I was good with that.
Yeah. It's such a stunning shot, and just, it like really prepares you for what you're going to be seeing in the movie.
I think, that's the thing. We had more of that type of imagery and more of, in the vein of that type of stuff that, unfortunately got nixed by the line producers. They just weren't going to give me the time. And they chose my director of photography, who is a very, very nice man. But he didn't know the language of the genre. No. And that was a huge detriment. He was a very capable workman like DP, but you really needed someone with a vision, with an eye for this thing. And I'm not saying that the movie doesn't look good. It does, but I think it could have been so much more with camera movement and everything else, so much more visually interesting and more a reflection of how I really wanted it.
Sure. Yeah. He just didn't have enough experience doing, or any experience doing horror movies. And
yeah, and if he did, it was very limited. He was more of a TV director of photography. And again, the line producers were the ones who suggested him, and they liked him. Because I worked with him before.
You got it made, and you got.
Yeah, we did get it made, and it made a little ripple when it came out, which was nice. So that part was cool.
let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the babyface mask.
Sure.
I read that one of Mark Botine's people designed that mask.
Okay. Yeah, Rob Botine.
Rob Botine, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, what happened was when we initially got the script, the original script, described the killer as wearing a literal baby's face stretched over his. So a skinned baby's face stretched over his. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Sorry. That's not
a little too far.
Yeah. So, but I got the concept of the porcelain doll kind of thing. Because I always thought that was kind of creepy. It reminded me a little of Tourist Trap and other things like that. So that was the basis that I started with. And I worked with this artist, Michael Broom, and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if, think about it, like over the years, the masks had been damaged and, because victims had fought back and everything, and then he repaired it, and so it's like now he's got a human jawbone on there. So it was really a blend of a little bit of Michael Myers, a little bit of Leatherface, and a little bit of Jason all together to try to just sort of, but again, because I had wanted to do my own like slasher character for so long, we spent a lot of time and we went through a lot of different iterations, and ultimately we came back to my original idea. And then once that sketch was done and approved, the effects guys hired the artist Jim Cagle, who had sculpted for Rob Botine on The Thing. He had also sculpted Jason Voorhees and the way he looked in Friday the 13th, the final chapter. And they knew him, and I was like, great, get that guy. So he's the one who sculpted the mask and then sculpted the way the face looked underneath. So it really did turn into very closely to what I originally had in my head. If I could have drawn it, it would have been just like that, but they did a really great job. And
it's such a cool looking mask. It's just very cool design. And in my opinion, it goes right up there with Jason and all those others with the masks, Texas Chainsaw, as we mentioned. I don't know if you know this, but there is such a love for that mask. On social media, people are posting pictures all over with it. People have bought like dozens of replicas of the mask and stuff. It's such a beloved character on its own in the movie.
I mean, I think if anything stands out from the movie, it's the look of that character. That makes me very happy, because that was something that was everyone left me alone on, and I got to do. So it was like the way he's dressed, all of that stuff. That was, I can safely say, along with the talents of people executing it, but that was my vision. So it makes me very happy that, if nothing else came from the movie, that people like the look of the killer.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have said, oh, I wish it was in a better movie. He should have been in more movies. I wish this, I wish that. But at least they like the look, and said that he should have been more of an icon and stuff like that. But it was just, that's just, look, guys, it's just that's just how it plays out sometimes.
Yeah. Have you thought about doing a sequel or
no
anything with that?
No, if at the time, if Dark Castle or Warner Brothers had been interested in one, I'm sure we didn't think of one really, but I'm sure we would have come up with something and made it completely different from that one. But yeah, I mean, there was no real interest. So no, it was that type of thing where it's like, well, I'm not gonna sit around and just think about something that, and try to come up with a story for something that's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like, I'd rather spend my time on things that have more of a potential to be, to happen. And, it's unfortunate that,
yeah,
I mean, I say that it's unfortunate, but, then I also sort of go, sometimes one's enough. And, if I think the thing is, I think if the movie had really found a fan base, at the time, and there was a huge demand. It would have translated into, it would have translated into sales and a lot of other things that would have told Warner Brothers, hey, maybe we should.
Yeah.
Well, think about this.
Unfortunately, that's pretty typical with movies like that. I mean,
Sure.
The Thing was a huge bomb when it first came out in '82. It didn't make any money back, and critics panned it and so forth. And so, it's pretty typical for movies like that to.
The only difference is that movie is legitimately great and directed by John Carpenter, and Hills is just directed by me. So it's not going to be, Hills is not going to be revisited and be like, years and years later rediscovered as, oh, it's this amazing piece of work like The Thing is. The Thing is a legit masterpiece that people just weren't interested in that summer because there was another alien out there. That was a little friendlier, but still freaky looking.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, you never know, because I got so many friends that just adore this movie, and I've talked to so many people that just love it. And
that's really cool, because I don't hear that much.
Really?
I do not hear, none of my stuff has gotten that much love. So I don't really hear, but I don't go, I don't Google myself. I don't go seeking out. I learned early on not to read reviews. And I'm very limited on social media. So I don't see a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
But I'm glad to hear it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Obviously I've seen some people who have cosplayed it, and people have sent me that people have gotten it tattooed on them, which blows my mind and is very cool. But yeah, I don't get to hear that too much of reaction. We thought we might hear a little bit when the Blu-ray came out last year, but even then we really didn't, and people didn't. I don't think there's a lot of reviews of the Blu-ray, which is kind of strange because it is a Scream Factory release and it's loaded. I mean, Rob and I obnoxiously loaded it. Any question you could possibly have is got to be covered on that thing.
Yeah, I love that. Shout Factory did such an incredible job on that, on the bonus features. I mean,
that was Rob and me.
Yeah,
that was Rob and me. Shout Factory is just like, sure, you want to give us all this stuff? Fine. They were just nice enough to allow us to be obnoxious about it, because we just figured this is going to be the last time we're going to get this opportunity.
Yeah,
so
it was
make the most of it.
An amazing. I mean, it's like 4 hours of bonus material that you rarely get to see in any special edition releases, and just love it. It's so wonderful.
We just figured that if this was going to get the chance, it's like whoever's going to buy this most likely is a fan. And if they aren't a fan of the movie, then at least they have enough stuff that maybe they can get out of it and feel like they didn't get burned buying it, because there's all this other extra stuff that could be interesting to them if they don't care for the movie.
Yeah. I mean, bravo on what you and Rob did for the special features. It's just one of the best special features I've ever seen.
It was very fun to do, but that's what Rob and I do. We do these obnoxiously long, in-depth, involved things on every project that I've worked with Rob. It's always been like incredibly detailed and long and in depth. So, it's just one of those things that,
For me and Paul, the longer the better is what we say with those.
I agree too.
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to talk about with Hills Run Red before we go into some other stuff is the score. The music, just a tremendous score.
Yeah.
We're huge film score fans. And when we heard that music, it was like, we got to go out and get this. And we got the Varese Saraband. Kind of disappointing. It was only like 30 minutes long, but still the music itself in that movie it's a character in its own rights for that movie.
Sure.
How did you get involved with was it Frederick
Edman?
Yeah.
Freddie had actually scored Warner Premiere and Dark Castle's first collaboration together, which was Return to House on Haunted Hill. And so Eric Olson had worked with him, and we met with a couple other people, but they suggested I meet with Freddie. And when I did, at first I was like, I don't want an orchestral score. And that kind of bummed him out. But then I listened to his stuff, and then I said, forget what I said. I don't want to put you in a box. You're obviously incredibly talented. Follow your instincts. And he was just a joy to work with. I mean, Freddie was such a great person to work with. And it was just fun being able to go over and listen to stuff. And boy, what a talent. And I love that he brought in very unusual instruments. He had a lot of creative ideas to like give things a very different feel to them. He brought a dulcimer in, and I mean, so many things, and electric cellos, and I believe, and opera singer, just a lot of very out of the box, creative things for this type of movie.
Yeah, it really,
I really loved.
It pumped up the movie. It really gave it a life of its own.
He's so talented. I really hope that I get to work with him again, down the road, if I can afford him. He's just, he's great. And it's the scores that he's done a lot of the DC animated films, and those scores are really, really great. He's really getting to do some very cool stuff. The last score of his that I listened to was for this movie called Alone, which is with Donald Sutherland. It's a pandemic movie, ironically, that was shot before the pandemic actually happened. But he just did wonderful stuff on that. So yeah, Freddie's great.
Yeah. So let's talk about you did an episode of Tales of Halloween.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. Did you option for that?
Tales of Halloween was a thing that was literally something that spawned out of a party. A couple of friends, including Axel Carolyn, were at this party, and she just said, we should get a group of us together and do an anthology that's all set around Halloween. And that was the genesis of it. And then she mentioned it to my friend Mike Mendez. And then Mike reached out and was like, would you be interested in doing something like this? And yeah, I mean, literally all the directors, for the most part, we were all friends before the movie. We all hung out together. We all celebrated Halloween together. We would do we'd watch movies and go hang out. And so it was a big social group anyway. And that's, the movie just became an extension of that. And we got as many people involved from our extended circle of horror, filmmakers and friends that we could to do that movie. And then it was just Axel and Mike put the invitation out to the directors, and knowing that they only wanted to do 10 stories, and then we met, and then it was a matter of people coming up with their ideas and presenting them, and then writing the scripts and presenting those, and going into production.
Yeah,
relatively quick. It all came together really pretty quickly on that one, which was nice. And working with Epic and those guys was very, very good. They were very encouraging, good producers who were really, really supportive. So
I wanted to talk about one more of your movies that we actually watched last night, and then we'll get into some viewer comment questions. That is It Watches. How did you come up with that story?
Okay. So It Watches, after I'd done Hills, and Hills had come out, but it didn't set the world on fire. And as the reality is, a lot of the times, it's like, I didn't have representation, I didn't have an agent, and I didn't have anything else ready to go. So, and I was hoping that, well, it's a Joel Silver film, this is going to lead to something, and it didn't. And I just got it in my head to do something experimental for like no money. And my friend Ivan Jarovic, who I'd worked with, you know, after I did Hills, I did a couple episodes of this television show called Lost Tapes. That was like sort of a found footage monster thing, which was kind of fun to do. And he came in playing the creatures. He was like being a super performer and stuff, but we just got along really well. So we started talking about this because he's, he was a struggling actor looking for parts and stuff. And I wanted to have this experience that was the complete opposite of the Warner Brothers experience, where you had all these people telling you what you could and couldn't do. So we had a friend who offered their house as a location, because I don't think they really thought it out that well.
Yeah, Paul and I, we were debating, is that Dave's house or is it the
no,
actor's house? Like,
I wish that was my house in a way, but yeah, no, it wasn't. But it was a friend's place. But we did it like literally. I said, I want to have a complete opposite experience. And the thing is, no one told me that this was like a bad idea or a dumb idea. And so, I mean, to be honest, we did it with no script. It's an entirely improv movie in the fact of I did not prep a shot list. We had a 30-page outline treatment to guide us, and we made it up every day as we went along. And some of that resulted in some really kind of interesting, cool things. And a lot of it resulted in some kind of very clunky things. And besides the mistake of that, all the things, but I learned so much by doing something like that.
Yeah.
But the problem was, you really need a script. Look, I know some people can improv movies and they're genius. I'm not. I need a script. And the biggest problem was I took a long time in editing, and I shouldn't. If I was going to do this as an experiment, I should have just done it and cranked it out in post, but I didn't. And then the importance of it got a little too like more and more, and the hopes for it doing well were more and more and everything. And the thing is, you have to realize that it was basically a $10,000 movie, and you just gotta, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think, and I don't mean to disparage the movie, because there's a lot of things about it that I do like. And I loved working with Will Barrett, who as the DP. And I think, given the limitations of the cameras that we used, which we made another mistake. I think of using Canon 7Ds, thinking that we were going to be saving money, when it really hindered us. There was a lot of naivete, but it was like the first thing that I really produced and wore all these other hats. And so the experience and the things that I learned coming off of that movie and doing it, really invaluable and really, really helpful. But again, it was a thing that took too long to finish, and then took too long to find a distributor. And then they decided to change the title, which was originally Coldwater, because it took place on Coldwater Canyon. And they decided to call it It Watches because It Follows was popular. And,
So yeah. Happens all the time.
But again, I look at it more as like a learning experience. Obviously there's like great people that I, became much closer with working on that movie, that are still friends and that still work with. I had another really interesting score by Freddie Eadman that I like quite a lot. And again, there's things that we tried that were above the budget level, or again, if that probably could have worked really, really well if we had more of a direct plan. But yeah, I look at it as it's an experiment that's out there that, most people are going to probably find it pretty boring. And there's a lot of There, just like everything, there's a lot of things that I would want to do differently now if I did that, because I think the story, I think the basic story has got some interesting things in it, but because of the nature of the way we did it, the execution is really hit or miss.
So we got some viewer questions here.
Okay.
Jason from Colorado asks, what do you consider is the scariest horror film, like the pinnacle of horror that everyone should see?
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Good.
Yeah, anything that I'm going to say is going to be pretty much, what are the pinnacles of the genre? And it's like, yeah, but I think that movie is unrelenting.
Yeah,
unrelenting.
Great movie, made for such a tiny budget too, and it really shows what you can do with such a small budget and very little experience, as Tobe Hooper had. So let's see. Ash from New York says that watching on Rob's channel, Midnight Metal, you have a love for heavy metal music. You ever thought about doing a documentary on heavy metal bands or the history of heavy metal?
I think there's been too many documentaries. There's so many good ones out there already. Is there a definitive one? No, because I don't think you'd be able to talk to everyone to have a definitive one, but there's enough really good heavy metal documentaries out there. I'd love to do a movie that's set in that world, or in the time period of when, at least in Los Angeles, it was really huge and massive. I think that would be really interesting. I'd be interested in that, or doing like a music biopic or something like, that type of thing. But but I don't think there's so many good documentaries out there on the genre and subgenres of that music that I don't know if I don't know. I mean, this thing, are you really going to get better than Decline of the Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years by Penelope Spheres, who was there in it at the time? I don't see it happening.
No. And you heard that Hulu, they're doing a Tommy Lee and
Pam Anderson. Tommy Lee and Pam Anderson show.
Yeah,
it's wild.
Did you see The Dirt?
I love The Dirt.
Yeah,
and Eric Olson, our producer of The Hills Run Red, produced The Dirt. So
cool. Yeah, that was an awesome movie. What are your top 3 bands that you listen to?
Top 3 bands I listen to. See, rock bands. It'll be Kiss, Foo Fighters, right now. And right now, see, that's the thing. It changes every day. But top 3. So right now, Kiss, Foo Fighters, and this band called Heilung.
Heilung.
Sounds familiar. You just have to look it up. Heilung.
Did you hear the new Rob Zombie album?
Yes.
Isn't that awesome?
I've been listening to it. Yeah, I've been listening to it since it came out. It's great.
I think that's probably one of his best albums he's done in the past 5-6 years.
I like stuff from every single album.
Yeah.
And I also really I really like him as a director too. I think he's always he's doing some very, very interesting stuff a lot of the time. And the fact that he's doing it under tight schedules and tight budgets and stuff. I mean,
yeah. Well, say what you want with his remake to Halloween and Halloween 2. Most people, when they do a remake, they'll just rehash the same old thing. He did something completely different.
Well, he definitely made it. And that's the thing. It's like, people complaining that he did something different with it. It's like, what, you've already had like 8 movies of the same thing.
Yeah.
Actually, 8 7 sequels, 6 technically, sequels to the original Halloween that have just progressively become more and more watered down as they go. And you're complaining that someone did something different. That I just don't understand. But apart from that, the things that he did with like Lords of Salem, The Devil's Rejects, I think is pretty incredibly directed.
Oh yeah.
I can see why some people are just like maybe a little tired of like, oh, it's always white trash redneck shit and everything else. It's like, look, the guy, that's what he's into and everything else. And you know what? He's a rock star. He doesn't need to please you.
And it works. It works for his type of movies.
Rob Zombie's got an aesthetic you can point to. I can't say the same. Yeah. And it would be nice to be able to have that brand that it's like people recognize, like, sure, that's, you know, this guy.
Alice from New York says, how do you, kind of a technical question here, how do you know what lenses to use in any given scene?
You can study lenses and know what a long lens is going to do for you, which is like, you know, depending on where your camera is, and you do a close up in a long lens, what it's going to do is it's going to blur out the background. So you're just focusing on that person. And what lenses to use and everything really come down to, what are you trying to communicate in that scene? Where is your focus? What do you want the audience to know and see? You know, someone like Orson Welles did deep focus, so you saw everything. It just depends. And I don't always know what lens. Sometimes I have to go through and look through them and go, oh, that's what this one does. I'm not technically on my lenses. I should be way more educated about them. But, you know, Hitchcock's favorite was a 50 millimeter. So you kind of, if you watch his movies, you kind of get a feeling of what those are. 14, you know, a 14 lens or 16 millimeter is going to give you a little bit of a fisheye wide sort of feel. And again, I kind of like that. And again, but that's also what I utilize with the, you know, my director of photography. You know, I tell him this is how I want it to look and feel, and, you know, he'll give suggestions. And then when I look at it, I go, yeah, there you go. That's it.
Yeah. That's what a DP is for.
Yeah, exactly. He is the director of photography. Doesn't mean that not knowing your lenses, you don't have to know your lenses. It's helpful, but it's the one thing that I haven't done yet, which again, I'm a little wary after the Coldwater experience of like, I'm just going to try this experiment, but literally like letting the director of photography be the director of photography. It's like, okay, I'm directing the actors and the script. You're directing where the camera goes and the look, and just let them create in their way. Again, that could be a really, depending on who you pick, really smart thing or a really bad thing.
Yeah. It's okay. For our last couple questions, do you have any advice for those getting into the business? Any words of wisdom, or perhaps someone told you?
Advice. Tenacity, perseverance are going to be two things. If you stick it out long enough and you work hard, you know, shit's going to happen, but you have to put in the work. Nothing is going to be, you know, handed to you. Everything takes work, and then it takes work to maintain what you get. You know, it's always going to be a struggle. It's always going to be a battle. Sometimes the financial gains are greater, and they get rid of some other stresses, but it's hard work. And if you think you're just going to, like, you know, skate in on your charms or something like that, it happens, but it's rare. You really gotta, you know, and also, I mean, this is really simple. Please and thank you go a long way.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say that. Please and thank you. A lot of people think that they're the director, they can do whatever they say, they don't have to listen to anyone. But like you said earlier, be nice, be courteous to these ones. It really does make a more pleasant atmosphere on set.
Yeah.
Last question we have is, do you have anything coming up that you can talk about?
I mean, right now, I'm writing stuff, but nothing feature wise yet is happening yet. I did, you know, just for fun, I've started to do like little shorts with this group that I belong to called Just Scare Me. You can find them on Instagram or Vimeo. And so, you know, we're just doing we're just doing stuff because, you know, we can. They're just like little, you know, 1 to 10 minute short films, you know, and it's like, so I'm doing that. I'm doing Midnight Metal with Rob on Saturday/Sunday mornings at 12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is a lot of fun. and we get into some pretty crazy topics and but I think, surprisingly enough, some really good topics too that, I don't think it, at least in the genre community or the fan community get talked enough about. I mean, like actual like human shit that I do like, and I get to meet like a lot of really interesting, diverse people there. So that's really cool. And then I'm doing this podcast with a couple friends of mine that's called Night Marathon, where we watch a movie that's either a modern movie or more of a classic movie, and talk about it. And it's just three friends getting together, sort of celebrating, some of the stuff that's, great, and some of the stuff that, needs a little love and isn't been getting it. So that's on iTunes and wherever you can find, podcasts and stuff. But Night Marathon. So that stuff's keeping me busy as well.
Very
so
cool.
That's what I'm doing, and trying to, trying to get the next, trying to figure out what the next thing is going to be and what I should do, and go about that. So yeah.
And we'll have the links to those Rob Burnett's channel and Nightmare Marathon in our description down below, so anyone can go ahead and check those out, and just scare me as well. So I guess that's it for us. Cool. We'll go ahead and let you go.
Well, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. Most people are going to be like, who the hell is this? Who's this guy? Why are we watching?
There is a fan base out there. No matter how small it might be, there are people out there that really enjoy your stuff.
I appreciate it. That's nice. That's really, really nice. And hopefully with the help of this, that, the base can grow bigger, because that always helps. But this is awesome. I really appreciate you asking me to come on.
Yeah. We really enjoyed it. Okay, we'll take.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Four friends are searching for a horror film that's been missing for 20 years.
No movie just vanishes without a trace.
But nothing can prepare them for the final cut.
Why the movie? Why is it so important to you?
Because people said it's the scariest thing they've ever seen.
You don't have to do this.
Everybody is expendable for the good of the film.
They're watching. Oh my God, what was that?
The hills run red.